Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me. I never thought it would end like this. One moment, I'm standing there, a glass of champagne in my hand, surrounded by people I've known my entire life. The next, I'm walking out the door, leaving everything behind. But the worst part? I knew, deep down, that I'd made the right choice. It all started when my fiancée, Emma, made her speech. We were at the wedding reception, and everything was supposed to be perfect. The venue was stunning. A restored mansion with chandeliers hanging from the ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows that opened to a view of the city skyline. Our friends and family had gathered from all over, excited to celebrate our big day. There were a few toasts planned, nothing too fancy. Some laughs, some heartfelt words, maybe a couple of embarrassing stories. What's a wedding without a little light humor, right? I didn't think anything of it when Emma stood up to give hers. After all, she was the one everyone had been waiting for. The one everyone loved. But as soon as she started talking, something felt off. Her voice wavered, not from emotion, but from something else. It was as if she was holding back. She began by thanking everyone for coming and how much our relationship meant to her. So far, so good. I looked at her, feeling a rush of warmth. I loved her, of course. She was beautiful, intelligent, and everything I ever wanted in a partner. But then she dropped the bomb. Some of you may know, she began, with a slight smile, how much Jake loves to be in control of everything. She paused, looking around the room. It's true. He's a bit of a control freak. She said it lightly, but the way she looked at me, it wasn't playful. It wasn't affectionate. It was something else. The laughter in the room was a little too loud. It didn't feel like genuine humor. It felt forced, as if everyone had been prompted to laugh. I could see the discomfort in some of the faces around the room. Some were unsure whether to laugh. Others were looking at me, waiting for my reaction. I forced a smile. Maybe I was overthinking it. After all, we had been together for years, and Emma had always been quick to make jokes at my expense. But this felt different. She wasn't just poking fun at my quirks. There was something colder behind it. Something that felt calculated. She continued, her tone turning even more biting. I've always known he'd be the one to plan every little detail. He even made a color-coded spreadsheet for our wedding, you know? Again, the room burst into laughter. This time, I felt my face flush. It wasn't funny. Not anymore. It was the kind of joke that's funny in private, but when said in front of hundreds of people, it feels like a subtle jab. I looked at her, hoping for some sign that she was just messing around, that she'd turn it around and make a joke to soften the tension. But no. She didn't look at me at all. Her eyes were fixed on the crowd, as if she was performing for them, not for me. Then she went for the kill. But honestly, she said, her smile widening, it's a miracle we're even here today. I mean, I had to drag him down the aisle. He was terrified. We almost called off the whole thing over something as silly as the seating arrangement. I felt the room go silent. I could hear the clinking of silverware, the subtle whispers. Everyone was looking at me. And for the first time in years, I realized something. I didn't recognize her. This wasn't the woman I had fallen in love with. This wasn't the woman I had supported, who had supported me in return. This was someone who was humiliating me for sport, making me feel like a fool in front of the people I cared about. My stomach churned. And then it hit me. Emma wasn't just making fun of me. She was telling everyone exactly what she thought of me. I was a joke to her. I wanted to speak up. I wanted to say something. But what could I say? Hey, maybe don't make me the butt of your jokes in front of everyone we know? I couldn't even look at her now. The laughter faded, and Emma wrapped up her speech with a tight smile. But hey, she said, we're here now. And Jake, you've done a great job. Maybe too good of a job. The room chuckled again, and she sat down, finally meeting my gaze for the first time all evening. But it wasn't warm. It wasn't affectionate. It was cold, detached, like she had just done her duty, and now it was over. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't angry at her. Not in the way you'd expect. I wasn't furious. I was just numb. My mind was racing, my heart pounding. I had spent so long trying to make everything perfect for her. I had bent over backward to give her the life she wanted. And now, it felt like I was the only one who cared. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came later, when I looked around at the faces in the crowd. I saw sympathy in some of their eyes, pity in others. But most of all, I saw something that cut deeper than any joke: indifference. Emma had just turned me into a spectacle. She had exposed every insecurity I had. And for what? To make herself look better? To show everyone that she could make a joke of me and still be loved? I couldn't take it anymore. I looked at her one last time, and in that moment, I knew. It was over. I stood up, my chair scraping across the floor, and walked straight out of the venue. I didn't look back. There was no point. She had already made her choice. And that was the day I canceled our wedding. I left the reception with my mind spinning, the cold air hitting my face like a slap. My body felt numb, and the walk to the parking lot seemed endless. I didn't even know where I was going at first. I just had to get away. The laughter from the toast still echoed in my ears, and the worst part was that I hadn't even processed what had just happened. It was like my brain refused to accept it. I had spent months planning this day, making sure every detail was perfect. I thought that was enough, but now it felt like I had been living in a fantasy. I reached my car and sat there for what felt like an eternity. My hands were shaking, the steering wheel cold under my fingers. What had just happened? Why did she do that? I kept replaying Emma's words in my head, trying to make sense of them. At first, I told myself I was overreacting, that she didn't mean to humiliate me in front of everyone. Maybe she just got nervous. Maybe it was all in good fun. But then, the cold reality hit me. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. She had meant every word. I could feel the anger starting to build in my chest, but it was mixed with something else: confusion, betrayal. I had always prided myself on being someone who could trust, someone who didn't let insecurities take over. But now, in that moment, I felt completely vulnerable. It was like I had been blindsided by the one person I had trusted most in the world. I thought about all the times I had tried to make her happy, the months we had spent planning the wedding, the compromises I had made to make sure she was comfortable. I thought about all the little things I had done to show her how much I loved her. And now, it seemed like none of that mattered. She didn't appreciate it. She wasn't even acknowledging it. I felt like I had been living in a dream, and the moment Emma opened her mouth during that toast, it all shattered. But the anger was brief. What followed was something I wasn't prepared for: disappointment. I had believed in us. I had believed that we were building something real, something lasting. And yet, here I was, sitting in my car, wondering if it had all been a lie. Was I just a fool, too wrapped up in my own desire to make her happy? Or had she been pretending to care this whole time? I picked up my phone and stared at it for a few moments before dialing her number. She didn't answer. I tried again. Still nothing. I could feel my patience thinning. Maybe she was busy talking to her friends, or maybe she was trying to avoid me, but I wasn't going to wait around. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I dialed her again, this time with more urgency. When she finally picked up, her voice was cold and distant. "Jake, what's going on?" she asked, like nothing had happened. "What the hell was that?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of disbelief and frustration. "How could you do that to me? In front of everyone? You humiliated me, Emma." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then a sigh. "Jake, it wasn't a big deal. I was just joking around. It wasn't supposed to be like that." I could feel my blood pressure rising. "No, Emma. It wasn't a joke. You made me the butt of every joke in that room. You made me feel small, like I was nothing." "I didn't mean it like that," she replied, her voice now defensive. "You're overreacting." Overreacting. Those words hit me harder than anything she had said during that toast. She was minimizing it. She was dismissing it. I took a deep breath, trying to control the anger that was bubbling inside me. "I don't think I am," I said, my voice steady now, though it took everything in me not to yell. "I'm done, Emma. I can't do this anymore." The line was silent for a moment before she spoke again, her tone softer now. "What are you talking about? Jake, don't be ridiculous. We've been planning this wedding for months." I shook my head. "It's not about the wedding anymore. It's about respect. It's about trust. And you showed me none of that tonight." There was another pause. I could almost hear her processing what I had said. "Jake," she started, but I cut her off. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not going to listen to excuses. You showed me who you really are tonight. And that person isn't someone I want to spend the rest of my life with." I hung up. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a grand gesture. But in that moment, I knew it was over. I sat there in the car for a while longer, trying to steady myself, trying to understand what had just happened. The woman I thought I knew, the one I had been so ready to marry, had just stripped away every bit of trust one had in her. And for what? A joke? A moment of attention? I started the car, my mind a swirl of thoughts and emotions, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back. Not now. Not ever. I had made a decision. It was over. I drove off, leaving the wedding, leaving Emma, and leaving everything behind. But the hardest part? It hadn't even sunk in yet. I wasn't sure if I'd ever fully understand why she'd done it, why she'd humiliated me like that. But one thing was clear. I had to move on. Because, at that moment, I knew I wasn't just walking away from the wedding. I was walking away from her. I didn't look back as I drove away. I couldn't bring myself to do it. The city lights flickered in the distance, and the night felt strangely quiet, as if the world itself had stopped moving. I couldn't help but replay everything over and over in my mind. The toast, her words, the laughter that filled the room while I sat there, a fool. She had made me feel small, insignificant, and it was a feeling I couldn't shake off. I pulled into a quiet parking lot near the edge of town and parked my car, the engine humming softly as I sat in silence. I felt empty, numb. My heart was still racing, but my body felt like it had shut down. It didn't matter how much I tried to explain it away. I couldn't deny the truth. I had been humiliated, and not just by her jokes, but by the fact that she didn't seem to care. I tried to make sense of it. Had she always felt this way? Had she always seen me as the butt of the joke? For the past few years, I had been convinced we were building something real. But tonight, she had shattered that illusion in front of everyone. I pulled out my phone again, this time to check her social media. I don't know why I thought it would help. Maybe I was hoping for some sign of remorse, some apology. But when I saw her post, the one she shared about the wedding, my stomach dropped. There she was, smiling, posing with her friends, looking as if nothing had happened. No mention of the uncomfortable tension, no sign of the apology I had hoped for. Just a picture of her and her bridesmaids laughing together, captioned with something like, "The best day ever." It was as if she didn't care at all about what had just transpired. As if nothing had happened. I put my phone down, feeling sick to my stomach. The reality of the situation hit me harder than anything else. She hadn't just humiliated me in front of our friends and family. She was pretending like it never happened. She was pretending like everything was fine, and that was the final straw. I had to make a choice. I had to decide if I was going to let this go, or if I was going to walk away and never look back. And as much as I hated to admit it, I knew the answer. The way she had acted, the way she had dismissed me, made me realize something I hadn't wanted to face. I had been living in a fantasy. I had thought I was marrying someone who respected me, who valued me. But tonight, she had shown me the truth. I wasn't the person she was in love with. I wasn't the person she respected. I had been a joke to her all along, and I wasn't going to stand for it anymore. I sent her a final message. Simple, direct. "I can't do this anymore, Emma. I'm done. It's over." I stared at the message for a moment, almost expecting her to reply immediately, to beg me to come back. But when the notification never came, I realized how much more this hurt. She wasn't even going to fight for me. With that, I turned my phone off and sat there in the parking lot, in the stillness of the night, wondering how I had gotten here. How had I let myself get so lost in someone else's world that I forgot to protect my own? I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back. I wasn't going back to a woman who didn't respect me, and I wasn't going back to a life that wasn't mine. It was time to move on. The days that followed were eerily quiet. At first, I thought I'd feel a sense of relief. I imagined the weight of that evening, of Emma's cruel words and the public humiliation, would start to fade. But instead, the silence was deafening. I hadn't spoken to her since I walked out of the wedding. No calls, no texts, nothing. The phone that had once been full of messages and pictures from her was now empty, like a black hole. I couldn't help but wonder if she even cared. If she was still sitting in her perfectly curated world, surrounded by her friends, acting like everything was fine. But as the days wore on, it became clear that it wasn't just Emma who had disappeared. The people we had both considered our friends started to distance themselves too. I reached out to a few of them, asking if they had heard from her, or if anyone knew what was going on. But I was met with awkward silences, vague responses, and a sense of unease that I couldn't shake. It was as if Emma's actions at the wedding had set off a ripple effect. It wasn't just me who had been hurt, it was everyone. She had made us all complicit in her humiliation. And as much as I wanted answers, I also realized something else. I didn't need them. I spent a few days going over every little detail of our relationship, analyzing everything from the way she had looked at me that night to the way she treated me when no one was watching. I started to see the signs that I had been blind to before. Her dismissiveness, the way she ignored my needs, the little jabs she would make when no one else was around. It wasn't love, not the way I had thought it was. What stung more than anything, though, was the fact that I had ignored it all. I had let myself believe that the good moments, the ones that felt genuine, were enough to justify the bad ones. I had convinced myself that we could work through anything, that love would be enough to overcome the cracks in our foundation. But the truth was, those cracks had been there from the beginning. I just hadn't been looking closely enough to see them. It wasn't until the third day of silence that I finally got a message. It wasn't from Emma, though. It was from one of my old friends, Chris. He asked if I was okay and mentioned that he had seen Emma at a cafe with some of her friends. They were all laughing, enjoying themselves, like nothing had happened. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure what to say. I didn't want to hear about her life moving on without me. But the message hung in the back of my mind, gnawing at me. By the time the weekend came, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I was angry. Angry at her, angry at myself. So, I did the one thing I swore I would never do. I reached out to her. It wasn't a phone call. It wasn't a text. It was an email, one last attempt to get some closure, even if I didn't think I deserved it. Emma, I've been trying to understand what happened. Why you thought it was okay to treat me the way you did. But I don't get it. I don't know what I did to deserve that. I've spent the past few days wondering if it was all just a game to you. If you've been pretending all along, or if this was just the real you showing up when you thought you could get away with it. But I can't keep wondering anymore. I need to know if this was just one big joke to you. Because it feels like it. And that's not something I can live with. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, but in reality, it was just a few minutes. I hit send. And then I sat there, waiting for a response. For something, anything, that might give me some peace. But nothing came. The silence stretched on, longer than it had before. I knew then that Emma wasn't going to respond. And that realization hit harder than anything else. She had made her choice. I wasn't a priority to her. I was just someone who had been part of her life for a while. And when I stopped being useful, she moved on without a second thought. The silence wasn't just about the lack of communication. It was the silence in my own heart. I had spent so long trying to fix things, trying to make it work. But now, I was left with nothing but the truth. And that truth was that Emma had never truly cared about me the way I had cared about her. I deleted the email. There was no point in waiting for a response that would never come. It was over. And in a strange way, I felt a weight lift off my chest. It hurt. God, it hurt. But I had made the right decision. I didn't need closure from her anymore. I had already given myself the answers I needed. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again. The days after I sent that email dragged on. I found myself staring at the same four walls in my apartment, feeling like I was stuck in a loop. It was strange. Part of me wanted to wallow in the hurt, to let it consume me. But another part of me was terrified of what it all meant. Was I really that easy to discard? I hadn't heard from Emma, not even an apology. Nothing. The absence of any communication from her made the whole thing feel even worse. Every time I thought about it, the truth became clearer. She didn't care. And that realization, as much as it hurt, began to set me free. The more time I spent thinking, the more I realized that it wasn't just the humiliation at the wedding that had broken us. That was just the tipping point. Our relationship had been fractured for a while, and I had been too blind to see it. I'd ignored all the signs, the little things she said, the way she dismissed my feelings, the way her attention would drift whenever I needed her most. I had convinced myself it would get better, that we could work through it. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had been living in a dream, and now I had to face the nightmare. The hardest part was realizing that I had invested so much of myself into someone who never truly valued me. The wedding, the plans, the excitement, the promises had become a symbol of something I wanted, something I thought was possible. But now it was a cruel reminder of how little it all meant. It took a few more days before I even left the apartment. I had to face reality. I had to face my own reflection. The man I saw in the mirror wasn't the same one who had entered the relationship. I had changed. I walked through the city aimlessly, just trying to clear my head. Every street corner, every familiar place, brought back memories of Emma and the life I had imagined we'd build together. It felt like I was walking through someone else's life. a life that had never truly belonged to me. Eventually, I stopped at a small cafe, nothing fancy, just a quiet corner place where I used to go to think. I sat by the window, watching the people pass by. I didn't feel sad anymore. There was an odd sense of peace that had settled over me. I realized that I had been holding on to something that wasn't real. I had let myself be dragged into a relationship that had started to chip away at who I was. And now, I had to rebuild. The hardest part of all this wasn't the pain, though. It was the shame. The feeling of being betrayed by someone I thought I could trust completely. But as I sipped my coffee, I understood something. It wasn't my fault. Emma had made her choices, and I had to make mine. And my choice was clear. I wasn't going to let this define me. I wasn't going to stay stuck in a past that no longer had a future. It was time to let go. It was time to start over. It's strange how life moves on without you sometimes. One day, everything feels like it's falling apart, and the next, you're walking through the motions, almost as if nothing happened. But for me, there was no moving on, without facing the truth of what had happened. Emma had changed everything with her words at the wedding, and while I had walked away that night, I hadn't truly left her behind. I had to face what had been left unsaid between us. I spent the following weeks in a haze. Work, friends, the occasional trip to the gym to clear my head. None of it seemed to help. My mind would always return to the same thought. Why? Why had she humiliated me? What had I missed along the way? One evening, as I sat on my couch staring at the silence of my apartment, I decided I needed closure. Not from Emma. She wasn't going to give that to me, but from myself. I needed to stop torturing myself with questions I'd never get answers to. I needed to break the cycle of looking back. It was easier said than done. Every time I thought I could walk away from the past, it reached out and grabbed me by the throat, reminding me of how deep I'd gone into this relationship, how much I had trusted her, how much I had believed in us. But one evening, something inside me snapped. I realized that if I didn't stop dragging myself through this, I'd lose myself completely. I grabbed my phone and began scrolling through my contacts. Then, without thinking too much about it, I sent a message to my closest friend, Matt. I need to get away for a bit. No plans, no agenda, just somewhere else. Matt didn't hesitate. The next morning, we were packed and on our way to a cabin in the mountains. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small, rustic place surrounded by woods, but it was exactly what I needed. A place where I didn't have to pretend to be okay. A place where I didn't have to see reminders of the life I had built with Emma. The first day was the hardest. I found myself sitting by the window, watching the rain pour down, feeling like I was losing pieces of myself with every drop that hit the glass. But Matt, being the friend he was, didn't let me sit there wallowing for too long. He dragged me out for a hike, then a late-night bonfire. We drank beers and talked about everything and nothing. It wasn't a cure, but it was a distraction. In the days that followed, I began to realize something. The world hadn't ended just because Emma had walked away from us. I hadn't fallen apart in the way I thought I would. The grief, the humiliation, the anger, it was all still there, but it wasn't consuming me the way it had before. I began to feel lighter. As if, with every step away from the life I thought I was going to have, I was reclaiming pieces of myself. The last night of the trip, Matt and I sat by the fire, the flames casting long shadows across our faces. "You're gonna be fine, man," he said, breaking the silence. "You'll get through this. Just give yourself time." Time. It seemed like such a simple word, but it held so much weight. That night, I went to bed knowing I wasn't just running away. I was running toward something. I didn't know what it was, but I was finally moving forward. No more questions. No more looking back. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. The kind of peace that comes when you stop fighting for something that's already lost. And with that, I finally closed the door on Emma and everything that had happened. I didn't need her to apologize. I didn't need her to regret what she'd done. What I needed was to stop letting her actions control my life. To finally take control back. When I got back home, everything still felt a little surreal. But I didn't feel like the same person who had walked out of that wedding months ago. I had come to terms with what had happened, and that was all I could ask for. It was time to rebuild, to focus on myself. Time to find who I was without her, without that version of my life. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone, least of all Emma, take that away from me. It's funny how life can hit you in ways you least expect. When I first walked out of that wedding, I was convinced my life was over. I thought the humiliation, the betrayal, would be something that I would never shake off. But looking back now, I see it differently. That moment, as painful and raw as it was the moment that set me free. The weeks following my time away in the mountains were a blur of small victories. I'd wake up every day with a sense of emptiness, but there was a quiet strength growing inside of me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't lost in the maze of what Emma had done to me. I was finally starting to see the cracks in the life I thought I had, and instead of feeling broken by them, I was learning to embrace them. It was liberating, almost like I could breathe again. Work became a welcome distraction. I threw myself into my job, something that had always been a constant in my life. It wasn't perfect. There were days when I felt the weight of the past creeping in, but it was mine. It was something I could control. Slowly but surely, I began to rediscover who I was without Emma in the picture. One evening, about a month after returning from the cabin, I ran into an old friend, Leah, at a coffee shop. We had known each other for years, but life had pulled us in different directions. She was one of those people who could light up a room, and seeing her that day felt like a breath of fresh air. We started talking, and for the first time in a long while, I realized that I wasn't carrying the weight of the past anymore. I wasn't worried about Emma or the relationship I'd lost. Leah listened to me, laughed with me, and when the conversation shifted to what I wanted out of life now, I realized something profound. I didn't have to have everything figured out. I wasn't the same person I was before the wedding. I wasn't the same person I was in that relationship with Emma. And that was okay. In fact, it was more than okay. It was a revelation. I had spent so much time trying to live up to someone else's expectations, trying to fit into a life that wasn't meant for me. But now, for the first time in a long time, I was free to choose my own path. As I walked out of the coffee shop that evening, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in months. Emma, that wedding, everything, it was all behind me. And it was time for me to build a life that was mine and mine alone. The next few months were full of changes. I took up a hobby I had put off for years, painting. I started traveling, something I had always dreamed of but never had the courage to do before. And I reconnected with people who had slipped through the cracks while I was focused on the wrong things. One night, as I sat on the couch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset, I realized something that made me smile for the first time in a long while. I had rebuilt myself. I wasn't the man I thought I was when I walked away from that wedding, and I wasn't the man Emma had humiliated. I was stronger. I was wiser. And I was finally at peace with who I was. Maybe that was the real lesson all along. It wasn't about getting an apology from Emma or understanding why she had treated me the way she did. It was about learning to let go of the parts of my life that no longer served me and trusting that I could move forward on my own. The best part? I didn't need anyone else's approval to do it. And that, I realized, was all I ever needed to truly be free. Months had passed, and the man I had become was unrecognizable compared to the one who walked away from that wedding in pieces. I had rediscovered my passion for life, and the quiet strength I had built within myself was now an armor. I didn't just move on from Emma. I grew because of it. The betrayal had transformed into something empowering, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had control over my future. I was enjoying my life. I traveled, I created, and I was no longer bound by the chains of a toxic relationship. But life has a funny way of bringing things full circle. One afternoon, I was meeting a client at a cafe when I saw Emma. She walked in with her friends, looking every bit the same as I remembered, dressed to the nines, her eyes scanning the room. She didn't see me at first. I could feel the old feelings trying to creep in, but I quickly brushed them aside. That man was gone. She was the same. Nothing had changed with her. She looked as confident as ever, like she hadn't just discarded someone who had once loved her completely. The realization hit me hard. She hadn't learned. She hadn't changed. I watched her for a moment, debating whether or not to approach her. But as I sat there, the old anger bubbled up briefly, only to be replaced with something much stronger, indifference. She wasn't worth my time anymore. I had rebuilt my life, and I wasn't about to let her back into it. I couldn't help but smile, though, as I saw her glance around. Her eyes swept across the cafe, but they didn't land on me. Instead, she kept looking around as if expecting to see someone else, maybe someone she thought was important to her now. She looked just as lost as she had made me feel months ago, and for a split second, I felt something I hadn't expected, satisfaction. It was then that I realized karma had already begun its work. She had always acted like the world revolved around her, thinking her charm and beauty would be enough to carry her through life without consequences. But here she was, not even able to notice me sitting just a few feet away. She had walked away from me without a second thought, but now, the reality was different. I wasn't the one stuck in the past anymore. She was. She didn't see me, and I wasn't going to make myself known. I stood up, leaving my coffee untouched. I walked out of the cafe and into the fresh air, finally realizing how far I had come. Emma's world had crumbled while mine had rebuilt itself piece by piece. As I got into my car, I felt no desire to confront her. I didn't need to. I had something far more valuable than what she could ever offer, a life I had earned through my own strength. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. The greatest revenge is not in confronting someone who wronged you. It's in living your life better, stronger, and happier than they ever thought possible. As I drove away, I glanced back at the cafe one last time. Emma was still sitting there, pretending everything was fine, surrounded by people who probably didn't even know the real her. But I had moved on. I had done more than just survive. I had thrived. And that, I knew, was the best revenge of all. Please like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all.